"Don't fire her, she saved me," said the 10-year-old CEO's son. The maid looked away and cried. It was a chilly morning in Chicago, the kind where the wind cuts through your coat and makes your skin tingle. The city streets bustled with hurried footsteps and the occasional honk, but inside the towering glass walls of the Parker Industries headquarters, something unexpected was about to unfold. 10-year-old Ethan Parker sat quietly in the CEO's sleek office, his small hands clutching the edge of the polished mahogany desk. His face was calm, but his eyes carried a weight far beyond his years. Outside the door stood Grace, the family's longtime housekeeper, worn hands, kind eyes, and a quiet strength that rarely went noticed. Grace wasn't just any maid. She had been part of the Parker household for over a decade, weathering every storm alongside them. But today, whispers in the boardroom threatened to end her time there, a decision made in cold business terms, with no room for the heart. As the meeting adjourned, Ethan's voice cut through the tension, small but unwavering. "Don't fire her. She saved me." The room froze. Grace, caught between pride and humility, looked down, tears threatening to spill. No one expected a child to speak with such clarity and courage, but sometimes, the smallest voices carry the heaviest truths. Ethan wasn't your typical 10-year-old. His curly brown hair often fell into his eyes, but he rarely brushed it away, too focused on the world around him. Behind his bright, curious gaze was a boy who had faced more than most kids his age. Diagnosed with a rare heart condition when he was just 5, his days were often filled with hospital visits, treatments, and endless waiting rooms. Grace, on the other hand, moved with a quiet grace. She wasn't flashy or loud, her clothes were simple, often a little worn, but always clean. There was a softness in her smile, the kind that came from years of caring for others without expecting anything in return. Her hands bore the gentle marks of hard work, faint calluses from years of scrubbing floors, folding laundry, and wiping away tears. Despite their different worlds, Ethan and Grace shared an unspoken bond, forged in moments of quiet care. She was the one who soothed his fears during stormy nights, who patiently read his favorite stories when sleep wouldn't come, and who always believed in him, even when others only saw limitations. The staff at Parker Industries barely noticed Grace beyond her duties. To them, she was just the maid. But to Ethan, she was a lifeline, someone who had quietly saved him in ways no one else could understand. It was a chilly autumn afternoon at the sprawling Parker Industries headquarters in Chicago. The office buzzed with sharp suits, hurried footsteps, and hushed conversations about deadlines and bottom lines. Yet in the quiet corner of the CEO's private office sat Ethan, his small frame barely noticeable against the sleek leather chair. Grace had just finished tidying the room, her hands still damp from wiping the glass desk. She glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with wide, hopeful eyes. Today, unlike most days, he seemed determined, there was a fire burning behind his calm exterior. "Grace," Ethan whispered, his voice steady despite the nerves he barely concealed, "I need to ask you something important." She paused, sensing the weight in his tone. "What is it, Ethan?" He took a deep breath and met her gaze. "Don't fire her. Please. She saved me." The words tumbled out, simple yet filled with desperate conviction. "I know people don't see it, but she's the reason I'm still here." Grace blinked, surprised by the earnestness. The her he spoke of was none other than the woman who had been the family's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Thompson, who was on the verge of losing her job after a small mistake in the office. Ethan's small hand clenched into a fist as he continued, "I promise, if you give her one more chance, I'll prove it. Just, don't let her go." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the city outside. The CEO, Ethan's father, Mr. Robert Parker, had been reviewing paperwork but now looked up sharply, eyes narrowing with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Was this really happening? A 10-year-old boy making a plea that could change everything? Grace felt her heart tighten as she watched Ethan stand taller, his voice unwavering. It was more than just a request, it was an impossible offer born from quiet courage and fierce loyalty. After Ethan's heartfelt plea, the room hung heavy with uncertainty. Grace's mind raced. She knew the company's policies, No second chances for mistakes that could cost them money or reputation. But looking at Ethan, she saw something more than a boy begging to save a job. She saw trust, gratitude, and a quiet bravery that wasn't easy to ignore. Still, the doubts gnawed at her. Could Mrs. Thompson really be the person Ethan claimed she was? Was this just a child's wishful thinking, or was there truth behind his words? Grace wasn't sure, but she knew she had to find out. "I'll tell you what," Grace finally said, her voice soft but firm. "I'll give her 1 week. 1 week to prove she deserves to stay. After that, the decision's final." Ethan's eyes lit up, relief flooding his face. "Thank you, Grace. You won't regret it." The next few days tested everyone. Grace watched Mrs. Thompson closely, how she moved through the house with quiet dignity, how she cared for Ethan with a tenderness that went beyond duty. Yet she also noticed the small errors, the moments where exhaustion or distraction crept in. Ethan, meanwhile, became a silent champion. He shadowed Mrs. Thompson's every step, offering help with tasks, whispering encouragement when she felt overwhelmed. His belief in her never wavered, even when others around began to doubt. One afternoon, Grace overheard a conversation between Ethan and his mother, Claire. "Mom, she's more than just a maid," Ethan said quietly. "She saved me when no one else could. You'll see." The week unfolded like a delicate dance between hope and fear. Grace wrestled with the pressure, balancing company demands with the subtle, undeniable bond growing between Ethan and Mrs. Thompson. Every day brought new challenges, but also new glimpses of why Ethan had fought so hard to keep her. As the days passed, the fragile hope Grace had clung to began to deepen into something more complicated. Mrs. Thompson wasn't just a maid to Ethan anymore, she was a quiet guardian, a steady presence in a life that felt more chaotic than anyone realized. But just as that warmth started to fill the gaps, the shadows crept back in. One evening, Claire called Grace into the study, her voice tight with frustration. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," she said, staring at a stack of bills and company reports. "Mrs. Thompson made a mistake yesterday. Left the oven on. It could have been a disaster." Grace felt the weight of responsibility press down hard. The company's bottom line, the reputation, the future, all seemed to teeter on a fragile edge. She wanted to believe in Mrs. Thompson's goodness, but the stakes were higher than any personal story. Meanwhile, Ethan grew quieter, his hopeful spark dimming with each new setback. One afternoon, Grace found him sitting alone on the porch steps, his small shoulders hunched. "Maybe I was wrong," he whispered. "Maybe she can't save this after all." But Mrs. Thompson wasn't ready to give up. She stayed late, cleaning tirelessly, double-checking every detail, trying to make up for the mistakes that felt like they were pushing her further from salvation. Her eyes carried the weight of years, of struggle, of silent sacrifices no one else saw. Grace watched this battle unfold, the tug-of-war between human error and relentless dedication. She felt the sting of guilt, wondering if the system they were all trapped in was designed to crush the very people it needed to protect. It was a quiet morning when everything shifted, almost imperceptibly, like the first rays of sunlight piercing through storm clouds. Grace had been pacing the office, tension wrapping around her like a tight rope. The board meeting was just hours away, and the weight of the decision pressed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Then, unexpectedly, Ethan walked into the room, clutching something small in his hands, a delicate, hand-stitched quilt patch, carefully crafted with tiny embroidered letters. "Mom, look what Mrs. Thompson made for me," he said, his voice trembling but proud. Claire took the patch, her eyes softening as she traced the careful stitches. It was more than just a piece of fabric, it was a symbol, of care, of hope, of a bond that no spreadsheet could measure. Grace felt the room shift, the cold formality melting into something raw and real. Ethan's courage to speak up pierced through the skepticism. "She saved me. Not just from danger, but from feeling invisible. Please, don't let her go." Suddenly, the reports and errors seemed less important. What mattered was the human story behind them, the quiet battles fought every day in the shadows of wealth and power. The board members exchanged glances, the hardened walls cracking. They saw, perhaps for the first time, the unseen strength Mrs. Thompson carried, the loyalty that no contract could buy. Grace took a deep breath, realizing the truth she had almost missed. Sometimes, saving something precious isn't about numbers or policies, but about the simple acts of kindness that anchor us in the darkest times. And in that moment, the impossible offer was no longer a question of risk, but a testament to faith, a chance to rewrite a story that many had already written off. Days passed after the breakthrough, but the tension hadn't completely faded. There was still a fragile balance hanging in the air. Grace knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but something inside her had changed. She saw Mrs. Thompson not just as the maid or the employee, but as a lifeline, the quiet hero no one noticed until now. The decision wasn't just about keeping a job. It was about restoring trust and honoring the courage of a little boy who dared to speak up when everyone else was silent. So, with a steady voice and a calm heart, Grace addressed the board. We can't afford to lose what Mrs. Thompson brings, not just to Ethan, but to all of us. She's part of this family. Mrs. Thompson, standing quietly in the back, blinked back tears, the weight of years of unseen effort finally acknowledged. Ethan, clutching her hand tightly, looked up with a smile full of hope, a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The house, once filled with cold silence and unspoken doubts, began to warm. Grace made it clear, this wasn't about perfection, but about compassion. Mistakes could be fixed, wounds could heal, and loyalty would be rewarded. Mrs. Thompson's role expanded, not just as a maid, but as a trusted guardian of the family's heart. And for Ethan, the security of knowing someone truly cared was the most precious gift he could receive. The story didn't end with grand celebrations or sudden riches, it ended with quiet moments of understanding, resilience, and the slow rebuilding of a broken trust. Because sometimes, real strength is found not in what's loud or flashy, but in the gentle persistence of those who never give up on us. Grace watched Ethan play in the garden, Mrs. Thompson close by, and felt a deep gratitude she hadn't known she was missing. The future was still uncertain, but now it was filled with something far more valuable, hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?